Hey guys, my name is Nick and welcome back to the channel, and in this video we are doing Q&A number 3. Now this was part of the requirements to get you into my 500 subscriber giveaway, and fortunately several of you had entered. In fact, it's about 19 of you. So I'm going to be going through those questions and answers for you now. Now these questions aren't in any particular order from the way they've been submitted, it's just the way that the video edit has worked out. So the first question is from Wizard Wargaming, and he asks what my favourite model of all time is. Now I'm going to answer this in two different ways. First is what my favourite model from all the background is, and then what my favourite to paint was. So my favourite of all time from background wise has been Logan Grimnar. Now his model has been around for a long time, it's quite dated. Certainly the original character model, he has been given a Santa sleigh since then. But yeah, he's been, you know, he's been a Space Marine forever, and he's led the Space Wolves through thick and thin, really in-depth background. And I started Space Wolves. I've had 2 Space Wolf armies. They were what really got me into the hobby. My first ever games were with Space Wolves. So yeah, he's pretty much been the badass of my collection. I've really enjoyed using him, and yeah, just his general character. But from a favourite painting perspective, I would say has been the Storm Eagle. Now this is a Forge World model, a resin kit, bit of a bitch to put together, but thoroughly enjoyed the whole painting of that. It's a bit of a challenge from a modelling perspective, challenge from a painting perspective, and it is the only one I've ever won a Golden Demon finalist pin with. So more than happy with that. Really did like the model. It's a good kit. I think the revised build of that has been a little bit easier than the very first editions of it. But that has been, yeah, my 2 favourite models. Hope that answers your question. Now the next question comes from my Ukrainian Supporters Club, aka the Unprofessional Hobbyist. Now he's asked a number of questions in here, so I'm going to address each one at a time. So the first one was, if I could go back and start YouTube again from how I originally did it, what would I do? I think the only thing I can think of is having Photoshop to start with. The ability to make thumbnails and graphics and so on in Photoshop, and having to learn through that has been really cool. I've only introduced that into my channel fairly recently. I was using like an online thumbnail creator. The quality of that was pretty ropey. If you go back through my back catalogue and have a look at some of the older thumbnails, yeah, they're a bit questionable, and I think the quality of those thumbnails has improved. Now I already had a lot of the camera equipment, microphones and so on, so from a technical perspective I didn't need to increase anything. My computer is pretty beastie, so I didn't need to do anything there. But yeah, if you're looking to do YouTube yourself, you need to stand out from the crowd, and thumbnails are one of the key doorways into your content. So I wish that I'd had maybe some better thumbnails to start with. That's probably the biggest change I'd have made. What have I learnt from my hobby during this YouTube kind of thing? I've got too much of it. That's pretty much it, to be honest. What have I learned? I have too much stuff. And when you're trying to do it on YouTube and you're trying to film pretty much everything that you do on the hobby, it increases the hobby time that you have available, because I now maybe spend sort of an hour painting or modelling or whatever. I then make a video, I then edit the video, and the whole process, instead of just being an hour's hobby time, is now sort of 3 or 4 hours long, just to do the same piece that I could have done. So I've quartered my time by doing content creation. However, that has meant that I'm getting more done because I've now got motivation or other motivations to do it. So it's a little bit of a weird catch-22 scenario. I could have more time doing it, but I'm actually enjoying the process of the whole 4-hour cycle. You know, 1 hour hobby time is about 4 hours worth of stuff to do for YouTube. So it's swings and roundabouts. And finally, where do I see myself at 1,000, 2,000 and 5,000 subscribers? Probably still in this little room here. Still making videos the way that I'm doing them. I am adjusting my content. I am adjusting my lighting. Hopefully improving each and every video. Hopefully I'm saying and a lot less, because when I go back and watch my videos, I do notice that I and a lot to fill those dead spaces of air. I'm trying to edit some of those out, but that just happens. But where do I see myself at 1,000? Yeah, exactly the same as where I am now. To be honest, I'm only about 398 subscribers away from 1,000. I probably won't have the watch time to then start doing all the whole monetization thing, so I'm not really fussed about that. At 2,000 and 5,000, you're just generally improving the content and quality and trying to maybe up my video output a little bit more. I'm trying to get in around about 2 videos. I'd like to be doing 3. I'd like to be doing 4. I'm certainly never going to be making a living from it, so this is a complete side project outside of my main job. So it's going to be difficult to be doing things, you know, like the big YouTubers are knocking out a video a day. That's just completely impractical. But as long as I improve, as long as I see growth on the channel, that is always a good sign. But, you know, I'm still going to be doing it regardless. If I still have 602 subscribers in a year's time, I'm still going to be making videos. I might be a bit dejected about it, but I'm still going to be making videos just because I enjoy the whole thing. Now, the next question comes from Steve Collects, and he asks, what is the most difficult and frustrating part of the hobby? What do I do or think to counter and remedy this? Now, I've kind of answered this in one of my other Q&As. My most frustrating thing in the entire world is cleaning up mould lines. Cutting things off the sprue and cleaning them up leaves an utter mess. Everywhere you end up with tons of little bits of plastic or resin or whatever all over your desk, all over the floor. It ends up in your shoes, it ends up in your tea. You know, it just gets everywhere, and you can never keep a 100% clean desk. Because if you're doing this hobby, you're constantly scraping and scratching and cutting, and it drives me insane, the amount of stuff. The amount of times I try and clean this off. I do try and clean my office or my study, OEBG headquarters, whatever you want to call it. I do try and keep it fairly clean, and it just ends up exploding all over the place when you start a new project. And I find that incredibly frustrating, but there's nothing you can do about it. If you like the painting side of things, then a good finish can only be generated by cleaning the models thoroughly. So you're kind of in a catch-22. If you don't care about painting and you just want models on the tabletop, then you cut them off, stick them down, paint them with a quick blast of a colour, and you're good to go. But if you're a bit of a, well, I've just spent 25 quid on a model, I want it to look as good as I can, I want to get the most out of my money, then you need to clean the models up, and that means mess, and that's frustrating. But then you see the finished product and you go, you know what, that was probably actually worth it. So the remedy really is in the final product. If you've cleaned it up and you've painted it as best you can, and you look at it and go, yep, that's really cool, then you kind of forgive yourself for the hours you spend cleaning mould lines up. So that's probably the only answer I have to that question. Next question then is from Carl Finch. Now Carl, I believe, is a previous winner of a giveaway, so he's back in it. So he's obviously been around a long time. Thank you very much, Carl. Much appreciated that you're still here and still asking me crazy questions. So your question is, what's my favourite way to play 40k? Am I a beer and pretzels guy, or am I a harder-edged competitive kind of player? I am probably more of a beer and pretzels kind of player. That's the way that I've always played the hobby typically. So back in the day when you started off with your HQ and 2 troops and you sort of built an army around it, I wasn't really trying to optimise rules or rule sets or anything like that. And more specifically in 8th edition, so many lists these days are built around stratagems that are available to a codex. So things like the Bloodletter Letter Bomb, as it's called, where you can spend command points which the enemy can't interrupt because it's before the game, and you can drop in a whole bunch of seething lunatics with a character, deep strike them in, and they've got something like a 3d6 re-rollable charge with re-rolls everywhere. That's what people build lists to now, or competitive players build lists typically to stratagems. And you can rely a little bit on psychic powers, but psychic powers can be denied, and obviously they rely on a dice roll. But stratagems, apart from I think the Drakari, I think can deny a couple of them, but realistically a lot of competitive people do that. Now I don't tend to build my lists around stratagems. I might look at the stratagems and go, you know what, that would be quite cool to use about now. So when I go into a game with my friends, I've only had one game this year, it's been quite disappointing. I'm looking to increase that very quickly. But the games that I have played at the back end of last year and this year, I've got all the stratagem cards in front of me on the desk. I remove the ones that don't apply to the army. So if I've got a rule about, I don't know, Dire Avengers or something like that, and I haven't got Dire Avengers on the board, then I put that to one side. But everything else that is viable is now in front of me. And then if the opportune time arrives during a game, then I can go, oh look, I'll use that stratagem, rather than sort of picking 2 or 3 stratagems and building my army around that. So I think by that definition, I'm probably more of a beer and pretzels guy. Have friends over. There's a sort of a close-knit group of friends that we do all sort of play each other semi-regularly around the area. So we're a bit more of a social, come over, you know, the wives come over, the wives do their own thing while we go and play Toy Soldiers, which I think is a really cool thing to do. And last year I did enter my very first and only competition to date. I sort of did middle of the road-ish, it wasn't great, but again my list wasn't, you know, super meta optimised. It was what I had painted, it looked cool on the tabletop, I thought it might work. And that was an index-based list, it wasn't codex-based, so maybe things would have changed. But for me, competition is good, I think competition is healthy. But typically most of my games, 99% of my games, are with friends and not based on maxing out the opportunities within a list. So I think that kind of defines me more of a friendly gamer than it does the win at all costs power type gamer. So hope that answers your question. The next question comes from Alex Attempts Tabletop. You have to do that, by the way, it is the law. And he asks, what would I ask myself, or what advice would I give myself if I was starting out in the hobby? Very interesting question. I mean, the way I got into the hobby, I must have been about 12 or 13. I think the original Blood Bowl was out. I used to go up to a local store, well, not a local store, a store in town, like a gaming store. It wasn't a Games Workshop. Some neighbours, or new neighbours, had just moved in down my road, and they bought it from wherever they used to live, and they got me into it. And then I started sort of playing around a bit. So that was how I kind of got into it. But what would you do now? The advice for getting into the hobby, for me, would probably be going into one of these big Battle Force box sets that you can get. There's normally 2 different ones a year, I think Games Workshop tend to do. So the last one, for example, we had the Necrons and the Adeptus Mechanicus. We've had Space Wolves and Orcs before. There's been a whole bunch of them, right? As you get into Games Workshop and you get these big things, and you bust that between your mates. So if you're just getting into the hobby, trying doing it on your own, if you have no one else that's ever heard of it, is a struggle. If you've got at least one other person and they're interested as much as you, go halves of the box set. Split the armies between you, and then buy one of those start collecting box sets. So the £40-ish, £50-ish one, where you get about £80 to £90 worth of stuff in them. That's the best way to start. That's the most cost beneficial way, or the cost economical way to start. It gets you used to the rules, you know, from an early way. Gives you plenty of painting challenges and all that kind of stuff, and then you can move on from there. So getting into it, definitely the way to go. Really, is those start collecting box sets. And if you can pick it up between your friends and get one of those box sets that interest you both, because typically you might not want one of the armies that comes in that set, but if you find someone who is, then that's the way to go. Next question then is from Akuja Hyra, and he asks, what made me start YouTube? And what keeps me motivated to do videos? Now, I may have answered this before, I can't quite remember, but I'll answer it anyway. What made me start? Well, after 7th edition kind of crumbled on me, I gave it pretty much a whole year's worth of wide berth, because 7th edition became horrible to actually play. I became quite demotivated with the whole thing. I mean, I was still painting here and there and building stuff here and there, but from a completion perspective, I had stuff building up all over the place, piling up, and I just wasn't getting anywhere, and I wasn't enjoying playing any games anywhere, because, as I said, 7th was so clunky. You had so many rule books. It was all over the place now. Not that 8th is much better these days, but it's a far better rule system, in my opinion, than 7th ever was. And yeah, I just lost the will to live with it. So when 8th edition dropped, I thought, you know what, I'm going to be 100% focused. I'm going to embrace 8th edition. I've bought all the books. I've got all the codexes. I've bought a new army. I bought the Thousand Suns to celebrate and all that kind of stuff. You know what? I'm going to start a YouTube channel and film my reinsertion into Warhammer 40k, and film my progress and my story and my journey with the hobby. And the reason for that was I wanted to learn a bit of video editing as well. I had the equipment, well, I had some equipment. I had a fairly decent camera and microphone, all that kind of stuff, and I thought, why not sort of do a video on how to do it? And if people want to watch it, then that was a bonus. If people didn't want to watch it, didn't really care. I was gonna film it anyway. You know, if you're gonna paint a model, a lot of people tend to write down the recipes for how they do it. I don't need to do that anymore because I just record everything. In fact, I was doing some more Thousand Suns not that long ago, and I had to go and watch one of my really old videos to see what colour mixes I was using to do it. So it's a good reference point and a library, which seems to be how a lot of people are using my content as well. It's more of a sort of a reference library of how to do what I've done. So for example, like one of my videos on rubric marines, for example, stage 1 I did it in two parts, and I think 20 people watched it in the first maybe 2 months. As the channel's got a little bit bigger, you know, it's not massive, you know, I'm not going to be making millions. As it's got a bit bigger, I've gone back and reviewed some of those, and they've now had 300, 400, 500, 600 views, which means people are kind of using it the way that I'd use it as a reference library. So that's what keeps me motivated, is that you go back and you go, well, I remember doing that video and no one watched it, and now people are watching it. So that means that I want to do more videos for more people to use this channel as kind of a resource of content or how to do things, painting techniques and whatever. So that's what keeps me motivated, and that's why I started. Kyle G asked, what's my least favourite part of the recent big FAQ? Now, I did a little video on that not that long ago. It was one of my most popular videos to date, in fact. It's had over 1,800 views, even though I got one tiny little thing wrong because I wrote it in my notes wrong. But I'm not gonna dwell on that fact. My least favourite thing is nothing. I think the FAQ addressed so many of the minor niggles that have come along with the game as it's developed in this living rulebook format. I think what they've done is really, really cool. So what they've done is they've stopped, you know, multiple units of the same data slate, so you can't get any more of this 8-winged Hive Tyrant Flyrant thing, which is crap. You don't get that anymore, which is brilliant, or the six Plague Burst Crawlers and a Feculent Gnarlmaw Tree, you know, all that kind of stuff that just isn't 40k. You don't see that in any background books. You only see it on the table where people are abusing a loophole in a rule. Games Workshop are now all over this. You'll get away with it once, maybe 2 games, and then, or 2 competitions, and then it's gone. So well done you if you want to buy into that. You know, the other thing about smite spam, that's now gone. Well, it becomes more difficult because if you want to smite, your smite value now increases unless you are super known for psychic abilities. So the Thousand Suns and the Grey Knights don't suffer from it, but then their smite spam isn't that bad because they're junior sorcerers kind of thing, only issue 1 mortal wound, not D3 and D6. So not horrendously nerfed on those, but still fitting without, you know, everyone suddenly going, you know what, I need a Grey Knight army or I need a Thousand Suns army. And those armies aren't particularly great in 40k anyway because you get so few of them because there's so many points. So they're never going to win a tournament like that. So never mind. The other big change was the deep strike thing. So you now can't deep strike outside of your own deployment zone, or deep strike, or whichever equivalent you are, teleportariums and all that kind of stuff, webway portals, blah blah blah. If you're held in reserve, you now can't deploy outside of your deployment zone in turn 1, and that stopped a lot of this alpha strike, deep strike brokenness that some armies were able to develop. That on turn 1, if you got turn 1, you then deep strike all your stuff all over the face of the enemy, and then they're stuck and they don't do anything. It's no fun for anybody. The important thing about 40k is, as a game, it's supposed to be a game with your opponent, not against them. So FAQs like this, addressing some of the more gnarly perspectives where people are, you know, twisting words and twisting intentions and all that kind of stuff, for me, is only a good thing. It got completely out of hand with 7th, where these things were just never addressed. 8th edition, they're trying to keep on top of it. They're doing a good job so far. So for me, I don't think there's anything bad in the FAQ. Next up is a question from Graham Collin, who asks, is there room for another army in 40k, or are we too crowded as is? Now, in my opinion, there is always room for new armies. Games Workshop have increased their studio staff quite substantially. There's more sculptors. It's easier to create stuff. They're not making it in clay anymore, 3 up and 3 down and all that kind of scaling issues. It's all done on CAD. So there is always room for new armies. Is it too cluttered as it is? Well, if you look at Games Workshop's product release at the moment and look how many different factions there are about 29 different factions as is. And that breaks down things like Space Marines, Space Wolves, Blood Angels, Dark Angels, so they count as slightly different factions. They've got a different product range. So is there room? Yes, there is room. Is it too cluttered? No, probably not really. There's always room for more, and more variety means more players, because not every army interests every player, which means you're going to get a bigger player base, which means you've got more things to fight against. So for me, you can always add more armies. No problem with that at all. You're seeing that in Age of Sigmar with the Deepkin coming out, for example. They're constantly expanding their range now. So 40k, no reason not to increase them. Russell Morris has asked, what kits from Forge World would I recommend in terms of skill level in order to build up to be able to do a Warlord Titan? Now, if you're following this channel, you'll know that I am doing a Warlord Titan myself, and that is on the channel right now. And I've also done several other Titans. I've got a Revenant Titan from the Elder range. I've got a Phantom Titan. I've got all kinds of Forge World goodies in my collection. Now, when I first started with Forge World stuff, I think I started with some of the smaller tanks. So some of the hybrid kits specifically. So you get a lot of things like Forge World armor panels back in the day that you bolted onto the side of rhinos, and now they're pretty much full resin kits or hybrid kits, where you get to use and play around with some of the resin parts and get used to how the properties work, how to get the best out of them, how to clean them, what the best way to attach them is, especially to plastic, pinning, gluing, all that kind of stuff. I started small and then sort of ramped up through the ranges really. So my recommendation is to probably go with a hybrid kit, so something that comes part plastic and part resin. Then move on to a slightly bigger tank, and then start moving into the realms of larger Titans. Now you could, it depends on your age really. If you're a competent modeler and you've been around any kind of, anything from Airfix, whatever, if you've been doing this for a number of years, you could probably jump straight into some of the more advanced kits. But if you're a younger guy, or you've got limited experience with hobby modelling, that kind of stuff, then you probably want to start smaller and then work your way up. So as I said, hybrid kits first, so that are part plastic, part resin, then move on to full resin, and then as you feel comfortable in handling resin parts, drilling, pinning, gluing, all that kind of stuff, and you can move into the larger Titans. That would be my advice. White Shark Gaming asks, if I could have a beer with anyone and chat about the hobby, who would it be with? There's only be one answer to that, and that's Robin Williams, the late great Robin Williams. I've been a fan of his movies for years. Good Morning Vietnam is just an awesome film. The guy was a comic genius, and it is well known that he was a wargamer. A lot of his stuff has recently come up for sale, I think, from his widow. And he had lots of armor car stuff and some real cool stuff. Whether he painted it or not, I don't know. Definitely was spotted playing it, had a vast interest in it. So if anyone was around that I could have a beer with now, it would definitely be him. Ice Wolf Inc. asks, which codex made you think I need that army? After releasing all of the, well, nearly all of the 8th edition codexes, I think we're still short of a few. I know everyone's crying about orcs. Let's wipe those salty tears away. There's still Space Wolves, there's still Sisters of Battle, there's still inquisitorial kind of stuff still to come. There's still a few more in the pipeline, right? So we haven't seen them all. But which one made me need that army? So far, I would probably say, based on armies I don't have, it's the Death Watch. Now, I did have a small 10-man Death Watch contingent that I kit bashed a long time ago that never saw the light of day. In fact, most of it didn't see the light of a paintbrush, or the touch of a paintbrush. But from what I've read so far, I haven't ordered the Codex. So I'm ordering the Codex the same time I order the new Knight Codex. So for me, in 8th edition, the one that's made me go, you know what, mixed units like that, mixed units of Primaris and sharing abilities and all that, whether it's competitive or not, I don't really care. But from what I've read so far, the Death Watch have got a really cool background, the models are really cool, mixed units are really cool, gives a lot of opportunity to mix and match and not be constrained with the current build of Primaris and all the rest of it. So that's the only one so far I can think of that makes me think I need that army. Next question comes from the 40k Lowdown, and he asks how I balance work, hobby and social life, as he always struggles with time to paint and play. Probably the most asked question of pretty much anyone who does 40k, right? Unless it's your full-time job and you get to enjoy all the realms of playing toy soldiers and get paid for it, in which case your hobby time becomes your work time, and also then you get to play games as part of your job. So for me, I probably spend maybe 1 to 2 hours an evening with a very, very understanding wife doing the things that I love, which sits up here in my man cave playing PlayStation or building toy soldiers, painting toy soldiers and making videos. In fact, she's downstairs right now having just got in from work. I'm doing this video before I go and make some dinner. So fortunately, she is mostly understanding, so I do get quite a lot of time at home. Now, we don't have children, so that takes away one large element of time that a lot of people lose when they become parents. So that kind of thing doesn't form into the equation. And with regard to work, I do have quite a demanding job. At the moment though, I have been working from home quite recently because of an injury to an ankle, which meant I couldn't even drive or get to the office. So I've been working from home, but working from home means you then don't have a commute time, and it also means you get sort of half an hour or so for lunch or in between meetings. You can skip up here, do a little bit of hobby, film some stuff, get a backlog going, and then I can still make my hobby content and still keep things going. I don't work weekends, most weekends. I do occasionally have to do a bit of work overnight and so on, but nothing too serious. So very fortunate in the time and the work that I have that allows me to continue to do the hobby at the pace that I do it at. Bazza from Underdog Painting asks, with people going over to Twitch, what do I feel YouTube could do to keep people? Now for me, both platforms are very different. I think Twitch is great for live streaming only. You certainly can't keep a sort of video on demand backlog. I think it only stores up to a certain amount of days or a certain amount of videos. So you can't use Twitch to form a library of content. It is purely about the social interaction of a live stream. Really works well with these people that do esports or video games and all that kind of stuff. Lots of growth from lots of live streamers who, people just go and watch them play games, want to interact with them in the Twitch chat, subscribe to them and all that kind of stuff, and support their favourite personalities whilst they watch and play games. YouTube for me is a different platform. Now YouTube Live does a similar kind of thing to Twitch, right? So you can go live on YouTube, you can do all that comments and subscribe and everything else in there. But Twitch is a nicer platform for live streaming, in my opinion. With the integration as well of Amazon Prime users being able to link their account to Twitch, to be able to give them a free subscriber per month, means that you can support your favourite streamer for free. Now apparently there is like 100 million Amazon Prime accounts in the world, which means there's 100 million people with a Twitch subscription available to give to their favourite channel, which is going to cost them no more money at all. I think that is a tremendous bit of integration, very, very clever from Amazon, who own the Twitch streaming service. So linking their platforms together is very cool. For me, what do you tell YouTube? Well, you don't tell them anything. YouTube is a different kettle of fish. It's all about content creation and having a library of videos that people can go and watch. But if you want to go and watch it live, I would switch to Twitch. Streaming live on YouTube, I've done it a couple of times. It's not the best experience. It's a little bit clunky compared to being able to do it on Twitch. That's just my opinion. And I know a lot of streamers out there do prefer Twitch over YouTube for that very same reason. But YouTube isn't going to lose anybody over Twitch. YouTube, I think, works perfectly well in harmony or in conjunction with those that are doing Twitch. I follow a number of people on both platforms. I watch live streams, I watch their videos, but I watch their videos on YouTube and I watch them live stream on Twitch. Both work perfectly well together. I don't think YouTube is going to lose anyone to Twitch. Sonic Sledgehammer Studios asks a very special question. He's asked, is there something I've wanted to build or paint that I've just not got around to for some reason, like a new army, different game system, or a larger scale figure? Now the answer is yes, I've got a couple of things that I've wanted to build that I haven't got round to yet, one of which is the Warlord Titan. I have finally got round to starting it. The other one is the Avatar of Cain from Forge World that my wife bought me. It must have been about 4 years ago for Christmas, and I still haven't even put it together yet. She constantly reminds me every year when I put, lovely toy soldiers on my Christmas wish list, And she goes, well, haven't you even painted that fiery thing from Forge World yet? And my response is no. In which case, Father Christmas puts me in his bad list book and I don't get any new toys. But there's no real army I've not got round to doing yet. They've all got progress on them. Even my new Death Guard, you know, at least primed, ready to go, and base coated. My 1,000 Suns are not far away from being complete. My Demons are not a million miles away from being complete. And bear in mind, the 1,000 Suns and Demons add up to about 9,000 points. So that's quite a lot of progress on those. Okay, the Warlord's 6,000 points on his own, but I've procrastinated long enough over that. I made myself a commitment that at 500 subs I would start. That's happened. I have started. This thing is going to get done this year. Any other game system though? I'm really a 40k fanboy. I like the setting of 40k. I like all the background for it. So I've not really ventured into sort of Age of Sigmar or any other thing. Imperial Assault, I really enjoyed it. I played Imperial Assault through the full campaign with 4 other friends of ours, and I really enjoyed it. And I thought, you know what, I'm going to go and buy that. That's really cool. And then I thought, you know what, I've got enough stuff. I haven't got time. It would just be another box set sitting in the cupboard like my new Necromunda set, and that would be too disheartening for me to start. So I try to stick to one genre of gaming. I do have Necromunda, as I said, but that's still within the 40k universe, so it still counts, right? Ish. Now, Basic Miniature Painting asks, how do I get through a lull in painting or video making, or basically when you can't be bothered with the hobby? Now, I've not experienced that for some time now. As I said a little bit earlier in this video, I did go through a whole period of basically taking just over a year off of the hobby because of the end of 7th, and it really wound me up, and I just sort of stopped. And I've been reinvigorated ever since, making hobby content and recording that and making videos about it. And I think that's kind of just kept my creative juices flowing sufficiently that I haven't had a lull. Now, those periods of time are sometimes broken up with holidays and vacations, so I'm actually going away in about 3 weeks' time again this year. We're going to Cyprus, and that'll give me another little break from the hobby. And then there'll probably be another vacation or a period of time off a bit later on in the year. So that kind of breaks up my year. I also travel quite a bit with work, and again that kind of breaks it up a little bit. It's not quite a holiday, it's a bit of a busman's holiday, but it means that I'm away from the creative content building, I'm away from my hobby desk and all the rest of it, and I come back reinvigorated, ready to make some more content. So lull-wise, I guess it's kind of managed by the fact that I have forced periods of time off on vacation or with work, so that I'm not sitting here, you know, 365 days a year doing hobby things. So those forced breaks mean that I do get those natural breaks in this, and that stops me having those lulls. And with 8th edition, I'm super excited that the frequency of new models and new codexes coming out keeps it a lot fresher for me. We're not waiting months or years for codexes to drop. You know, we've got new stuff. The Warhammer community stuff keeps you interested. There's lots of leaks and teasers and trailers and everything else. Keeps you going, and it means that there's no sort of drop in interest for me at the moment. So as long as that keeps going, then we're all good. Now, Steve's Small World asks how I balance my time between hobby life and producing content. I've kind of just answered that question about 2 questions ago, so for this one, I'm afraid, Steve, I'm just going to refer you back to the previous answer. Now, Peninsula Painting Projects has asked, what is the most interesting place, or where is the most interesting place I've visited through work? Now, I have travelled all over Europe with work, and a few places in the US as well. Probably the most interesting place I've been to was Budapest. I really enjoyed that city. I was there for about a week. Just a fascinating city, right? So you've got 2 halves of a city, Buda and Pest. Really historic, lots of really cool things going on there. And so much so that we actually went back to the Christmas markets there with Ian from White Shark Gaming and both our wives, and we both had a great long weekend there. And yeah, so that's probably really it. I mean, I have been all over the place, but that was probably the one that really sticks in the mind the most. Big Mac Dangskull has asked what my least favourite part of the hobby is. I kind of answered that earlier in this video, but just as a recap, mould lines, cleaning models up, that kind of stuff grates me no end, but it's a necessary evil, unfortunately. But it is the part of the hobby that I really dislike the most. Now, the boys over at Frost and Fists have a number of questions, the first of which is, what's my favourite conversion I've ever done? I'm not the biggest converter of models, in all honesty. I don't mind a little bit of kit bashing here and there where you put parts in one plastic kit into another, but chopping and changing and all the rest of it, I'm not really the biggest person to do it. My entire old Space Wolf army, for example, was a bit of a kit bash because none of them have got helmets on, they're all bareheaded, so, and then I had to sculpt a little bit of hair onto some of them just to vary the heads up, but nothing that I would class as a massive conversion. I've got a Blood Angel Captain that's got wings from one kit and a jetpack from another kit and a sword from another kit. But realistically, that is just standard kit bashing rather than what I would call traditional converting, where you are dramatically altering the original purpose of the components. So for me, I'm not the biggest converter. What hobby skill of mine is my signature move? I don't think I've really got one. I have kind of mentioned maybe in some Forge World videos of what I call ankle kebabs or joint kebabs, where you take a long piece of brass rod and then you skewer that through multiple pieces of resin rather than what I would call pinning, where you're going from one piece to another. I do a kebab where you're taking about 7 or 8 components and then pushing them all the way through one single piece of brass rod, which obviously makes it much stronger. Is that a signature move? I've not seen other people do it, so maybe that could be classed as my signature manoeuvre. The old average Brit gaming resin kebab. Is that a thing? I don't know. Man behind the hobby then, what are my favourite bands? I'm a bit old schoolish when it comes to bands, although there are some new artists that I like. Newer artists, Adele and Ed Sheeran are probably my 2 current favourites. Florence and the Machine I quite like. I've seen both of those, I've seen 2 out of the 3 of those live. Adele I saw live before she cancelled the rest of her tour, so that was superb. Ed Sheeran I would like to see live. Florence and the Machine I saw live last year at Hyde Park Calling, I think it was, in London. But going back over the years, Manic Street Preachers, Pink Floyd, those kind of people, Guns N' Roses, you know, more mainstream. I'm not a heavy metal, thrash metal kind of person. I'm not really into sort of grunge or anything like that. I went through the 90s doing Oasis and Blur and those kind of people. But normally bands where they play their own music, they have instruments and they make a good noise, rather than just sort of vocal type groups. I like an artist that can do their own music and write their own lyrics. So any of this pop idol, X Factor kind of stuff, not really my thing. But you know, Ed Sheeran really impresses me. I think he's got a great voice. He can just stand on the stage with just him and his own guitar and captivate 100,000 people. Not very many people in this modern day, I think, can do that, really. Donald John asks, what's been my favourite model I've ever painted? I've painted a lot of models over the years, but what's been my favourite? I think that's quite hard to pick, but probably Vulture Gunship. I've just recently put pictures of that up on Instagram. I'll put a picture up on the screen now, actually, so you can see exactly what I mean. Really like the model, really like the paint job that I did on it, so that's probably one of my favourites. I've got a lot of models to pick from, but if I was to pick one right now, right this very second, that's top of my mind. Now, Big Beard Painting has asked, what's my favourite part of the hobby? Now, I've answered a couple of times what my least favourite is. This is the first time I've seen what's my favourite part, and it's probably the moment you finish. Well, I say finish, no one ever truly finishes an army, right? Because there's always things to add, new models come out and all the rest of it, and you go, you know what, I just need to do a bit more paint on that one, or highlight that one a bit more, or something like that. But what's my favourite is when you've got to that point where you're completely happy with the final model of, say, a 2,000 point army, and you've hit that target. You said to yourself, right, I've bought 2,000 points of something, and you finish that last one, and you put them all down on the table, and you look at them and go, that looks awesome. All through the pain and heartache of all the bits I don't like about the hobby, so all the mould line cleaning and all that kind of stuff, far outweighed by the fact that when you go, look how cool that cohesive, based, painted force looks like. And then when you take it down to a game and people compliment you and say, hey mate, that army looks awesome. That to me is probably my favourite part. So then guys, that's going to wrap up this Q&A number 3. Thank you very much to everyone who submitted their questions as part of my 500 subscriber giveaway. Really appreciate the time and effort that you spend to ask those questions. I hope I've satisfied your quest for knowledge and provided some good answers for you. And thank you very much for watching. If you did enjoy the video, don't forget to like, comment and subscribe, and I shall catch you guys on the next giveaway. The next video.